economic advisor KV Subramanian with us. Thank you so much for speaking with Hindustan Times. I think this is a question you
Thanks.
must be getting. Thank you. This is a question you must be getting quite a lot these days. When can we expect the second stimulus package?
Very soon.
Because many people have said that this is such an emergency, this is such a financial emergency that every day is making it worse. Could you give us an idea of, what is it that is causing the delay, sir?
So primarily, work is on trying to make it very comprehensive. Not just in terms of the stimulus, both in from a short-term perspective, medium to long-term perspective, bringing in some reform measures as well, and trying to make it as comprehensive as possible. And that's the look. Policy making is also about balancing the different interests, and that's something that is being taken into account. Do recognize that the during the period of the lockdown, in any case, economic activity has remained down. Because while the lockdown is on, you can't do a bunch of economic activities anyways.
Sure. Is there, we are hearing lots of voices, people of concern. I'm sure you hear the opposition leaders and the, financial experts. I know that you are part of those meetings where you have consulted many stakeholders. They're all suggesting several figures. One suggestion that many people looking at US giving a 10% of their GDP as stimulus. Others have said that India should at least look at 5 to 7% of its GDP as part of this stimulus package. What they did in the first round wasn't enough. Do you want to comment on such suggestions?
I certainly want to, because there are a few key aspects that I want to actually throw some light on. Firstly, if you look at the numbers, I think we have to be a little careful in not adding apples and oranges. If you look at those aspects of the package that is not a direct cost. Just to take as an example, the loans that are given on which guarantees are given. I'm going to take the example of the package that the UK came up with. The package given by the United Kingdom had a 350 billion pound loan, package to various corporates, which was basically guaranteed by the government. Now, the entire cost of that is certainly not 350 billion pounds. It is going to be a fraction of that, possibly about 35 billion pounds. And so the number that's floating around saying 15% of GDP, that number you get when you add the 350 billion pounds. But when you actually add the proper cost, which is a fraction of that, about 35 billion pounds, the actual number comes out to be 3.7% of GDP and not 15% of GDP. A similar analysis, if you do it for the United States as well, it does not come to be 10% of GDP. It comes around 6.7, 6.8% of GDP. So we have to first, I think, be very careful in the numbers that we use. And I think that's an exercise that we have done very carefully. We've looked at each of those packages. Second part that we have to remember is, unlike the United States, the dollar is a reserve currency. And so they can, they have far more ability to be able to, sort of fund packages like these. Rupee is not a reserve currency. Secondly, look at the tax to GDP ratio, and the past part of the population that is taxed. About 40 to 50% of the population in the United States pays taxes. In contrast, in India, is actually less than 10%.
So in the past few days, we've had several financial agencies predict the kind of growth we're going to see. Moody's, which said 2.5% last month, they came back this month and said it's just going to be above 0%. According to you, just how bad is it going to be?
So I think, we have to, Sunetra, keep in mind that this is not something that is specific to India. This is a global pandemic. This is an extremely uncertain period. So any projection that I or any other analyst for that matter talk about, we will have to continually recalibrate as things basically evolve. Any number we come up with, and for instance, the IMF came up with this estimate that India will grow at 1.9%. In a situation where the global economy is going to shrink at 3%. That's a baseline estimate, but they actually put in a bunch of caveats in it, which is what everybody should be doing given the significant amount of uncertainty, something that we economists think about as unknown unknowns, that we are encountering. That said, we still have to rely on proxies, and the best proxy for thinking about how might the economy fare, is the 1918 Spanish flu, which happened 102 years back. Even with the Spanish flu, the economy actually did have a V-shaped kind of relationship. And what I mean is that there was basically a decline in output, and then there was actually a significant increase in output, and so the slope of GDP increase actually was more or less held even with the Spanish flu. So with that, I would say that overall, I think between 1 to 2% of GDP is something that I would actually think for India, and which will still keep India, to be better than the global economy. But I would, as I have already said, this will need to be continually recalibrated.
I just wanted to ask you, one of the things that has become the central point, which everybody is focusing on these days, is the plight of the migrants. Do you think, in retrospect now, sir, do you think when the planning was on to bring about the lockdown, that was an oversight? No one thought about the number of migrants who would instantly start panicking, and this movement and this kind of, because there is such a, we hear reports every day of them going hungry. Now there's a problem of their being taken back, but even then there's a problem of them not having food. They'll be in quarantine. Was this an oversight?
The government has taken all the necessary steps to to be conscious and respond to the needs of the migrant workers. There have been camps that have been set up. As you rightly said, there have been to sort of take them back home. Just recently, a train from Hyderabad went to Bihar. I think there is no denying the fact that that we are going through a crisis, and we are responding to the needs, in the best manner, and this is something which the government is keeping in mind and is taking steps to do the needful.